Easter, with its pastel hues, frosted confections, and jubilant celebrations of resurrection, seems like a season of pure joy. A time when eggs are dyed, baskets brim with sweets, and the world awakens in the soft light of spring. Yet beneath this cheerful facade lies a history far older, steeped in rites of fertility, renewal, and reverence for the forces of nature. Long before Easter's Christian significance, the season was marked by ancient celebrations tied to the rhythms of the earth. It was a time to honour the balance of light and dark, the rebirth of life after the long death of winter. From the hare, a symbol of fertility sacred to the goddess Aostra, to eggs representing creation itself, these practices carried meanings that whispered of a world where humanity's survival depended on the mercy of the natural world. How then did these primal, earthy traditions, celebrations of soil and seed, of life and death intertwined, become woven into the fabric of Christianity's holiest day? How did symbols of pagan fertility merge with the story of resurrection, creating the Easter we know today? The answer lies in a fascinating fusion of faiths, where the early church sought not to erase these ancient rites, but to transform them, baptizing their meanings into a new religious framework. The cheerful pastel masks a much darker truth. Easter's roots are tangled in the soil of forgotten rituals, where gods of nature ruled and the forces of life and death were ever present. This is a journey into the shadows of spring's most sacred traditions, an exploration of how ancient humanity sought to understand its place in a world of cyclical renewal. The pastel eggs and Easter lilies might bloom anew each year, but they carry the weight of older stories, where survival was sacred and the divine was found in the turning of the seasons. The spring equinox, a fleeting moment when light and dark hold each other in perfect balance, has captivated humanity for millennia. It is a turning point in the great wheel of the year, a signal that the long shadows of winter are retreating and life is stirring beneath the earth. For ancient cultures, this was no mere change of season. It was a sacred threshold, where the forces of nature seemed to conspire in a promise of renewal and abundance. In Babylon, the equinox was celebrated with Akitu, a festival that honoured Marduk, the god of creation, and marked the renewal of cosmic order. Over 12 days, rituals played out that reenacted the battle between chaos and harmony, reflecting the precarious balance that the equinox symbolised. It was a time to affirm the cycles of life and death, ensuring the continuation of the natural world. Among the Celts, this liminal season was tied to Aostra, a goddess whose very name evokes dawn and the awakening of the earth. Her symbols, hares and eggs, represented fertility and creation, themes central to the survival of agrarian societies. Fires were lit on hilltops to herald her arrival, a gesture both celebratory and protective, as communities sought her blessing for fruitful harvests. In Norse traditions, Freyja, the goddess of fertility, beauty and love, was honoured during spring celebrations. Her influence was vast, tied not only to the flourishing of crops, but also to the renewal of life itself. Rituals invoking Freyja often involved offerings of seeds, reflecting the intimate connection between human life and the rhythms of the land. The themes of these celebrations were universal: renewal, fertility, and the eternal dance of life and death. In every corner of the ancient world, festivals marked this pivotal season, with rites designed to honour the forces of nature and ensure the community's survival. The equinox wasn't just a celebration, it was a sacred pact between humanity and the earth, a recognition of the fragile balance that sustained life. These rites also carried with them an acknowledgement of death's role in life's renewal. Seeds buried in the earth must first decay to sprout anew. The cold grip of winter must loosen to allow spring's warmth to return. Life, death, and rebirth were not separate. They were a cycle, each phase necessary and divine. It was within this fertile ground of belief that the early church would later plant the seeds of Easter. But before that transformation, these rites stood as testaments to humanity's relationship with the natural world, where gods and goddesses ruled over the cycles of creation. Their echoes remain, woven into traditions that have long since forgotten their origins, yet still carry the weight of ancient reverence. When Christianity began its slow and steady expansion, it encountered a world deeply rooted in seasonal rhythms and ancient rituals. The Church, recognizing the power of these traditions, chose not to eradicate them outright, but to adapt them, weaving its own theology into the fabric of pagan belief systems. Easter, as we know it, was born from this careful fusion. The timing of Easter was no accident. The Church calculated its date to align with the spring equinox and the first full moon thereafter, mirroring the celestial markers that governed pagan festivals. This alignment ensured that Easter would resonate with the rhythms already etched into the lives of converts, making the new faith more accessible and familiar. Central to this strategy was the resurrection narrative, which echoed the cyclical themes of rebirth found in pagan mythology. Eostre, the Germanic goddess of spring, was already associated with life's renewal and the return of warmth and light. Her symbols, the hare and the egg, represented fertility and creation, themes that found a natural parallel in the Christian story of resurrection. By placing Christ's victory over death within the context of spring's awakening, the Church offered a seamless transition for those steeped in older traditions. Similarly, the Greek myth of Persephone lent itself to this synthesis. Persephone's descent into the underworld and her return to the surface mirrored the dying and rising cycles of nature, a theme deeply resonant with the Christian narrative of death and resurrection. In adapting these stories, the Church preserved their power while reinterpreting their meaning, transforming symbols of the earth's renewal into emblems of spiritual salvation. The fusion extended beyond theology to practice. Pagan rites celebrating the return of fertility, planting seeds, lighting fires, and offering gifts to deities were reframed as Christian rituals. The egg, once a symbol of creation in pagan cultures, became a representation of the empty tomb and Christ's resurrection. Processions honouring fertility gods evolved into Easter parades, and feasts marking the equinox became celebrations of the resurrection. This blending was not without tension. Early Christian leaders often debated the extent to which pagan practices could be incorporated without compromising the faith's purity. Yet pragmatism prevailed. The Church understood that to win converts, it had to speak the language of the people, a language deeply rooted in the cycles of nature and the gods who governed them. By absorbing these ancient rites into its own liturgical calendar, the Church not only ensured the survival of its faith, but also preserved the essence of the pagan traditions it sought to replace. Easter became a celebration that felt both ancient and new, a testament to the enduring power of humanity's connection to the natural world and the stories it inspires. Beneath the cheerful guise of the Easter bunny lies a symbol steeped in ancient lore, a creature far older than chocolate eggs and springtime pageantry. The hare, swift and elusive, held profound significance in pagan cultures, particularly those tied to the rhythms of the earth. It was not merely an animal, but a sacred emblem of fertility, rebirth, and the cyclical nature of life. The hare's sacred status is most famously linked to Eostre, the Germanic goddess of spring and fertility. Celebrated during the equinox, Eostre heralded the return of warmth and life to the land. Her companion, the hare, embodied the forces she governed: reproduction, abundance, and renewal. Unlike the domesticated rabbit, the wild hare was mysterious and untamed, its nocturnal habits and seasonal mating cycles aligning it with lunar rhythms and the mysteries of creation. Ancient peoples saw the hare as a creature of paradox. It was both prolific and elusive, a symbol of life's abundance but also of its fragility. Its ability to seemingly vanish into the earth and reappear as if reborn resonated with themes of death and renewal that were central to pagan spirituality. In Celtic mythology, hares were believed to carry messages from the otherworld, linking them not only to fertility but to the supernatural. The hare's connection to the moon further deepened its symbolic power. Lunar cycles governed planting and harvesting, tides and seasons, life and death. The hare, active at dusk and dawn, became a living representation of these transitions. In some pagan traditions, it was believed that the goddess herself transformed into a hare during the full moon, leaping across the night sky as a guardian of life's continuity. When Christianity spread through Europe, it encountered this deeply ingrained reverence for the hare. Rather than attempt to erase its symbolism, the Church allowed it to evolve, reshaping its meaning to align with Easter's narrative of resurrection and renewal. Over time, the hare transformed into the Easter bunny, its pagan roots obscured but never entirely forgotten. The Easter bunny's role in modern celebrations, delivering eggs, a potent symbol of creation, further reflects its ancient associations. This playful figure, now a delight for children, carries with it echoes of older, more sacred meanings. Though the hare has been tamed into a symbol of innocence, its deeper history whispers of life's profound mysteries, the delicate balance between fertility and survival, and the enduring cycles that bind humanity to the natural world. If the hare symbolizes the energy of creation, the egg is its vessel, holding the promise of life within a fragile shell. Across cultures and millennia, the egg has stood as a universal emblem of fertility, rebirth, and cosmic order, a perfect microcosm of the universe itself. In ancient Egypt, the egg was revered as a symbol of primordial creation. Myths spoke of a cosmic egg from which the sun god Ra emerged, bringing light and life to the world. This notion of the egg as the origin of all things was not unique to Egypt. The Persians celebrated the egg during their spring festival of Nowruz, exchanging decorated eggs as gifts to mark the renewal of life and the arrival of abundance. For the Romans, the egg was tied to the goddess Cybele, whose rites of spring included rituals celebrating fertility and regeneration. Cybele's festivals, filled with vibrant processions and offerings, often featured eggs as sacred objects, representing the continuity of life. The egg's unbroken form and its hidden potential made it a natural metaphor for the cycles of existence: birth, death, and rebirth. With the rise of Christianity, the egg took on new layers of meaning. The early church, drawing on these ancient associations, adopted the egg as a symbol of Christ's resurrection. Just as life emerges from within the egg, so too did Christ rise from the tomb, bringing the promise of salvation and renewal to his followers. The egg's dual nature, its hard shell concealing the fragile life within, mirrored the paradox of death and resurrection central to Christian belief. The practice of decorating eggs, a tradition now synonymous with Easter, also has its roots in pagan customs. In Eastern Europe, for example, the art of the Pysanky, the intricate decoration of eggs, dates back to pre-Christian times. These elaborately dyed and etched eggs were used in rituals to honour the gods of fertility and ensure the health of crops and livestock. Early Christians adopted this practice, infusing it with their own symbolism. Red eggs in particular became popular, representing the blood of Christ and the joy of resurrection. Eggs were also central to springtime feasts, bridging the sacred and the mundane. In medieval Europe, the Lenten fast prohibited the consumption of eggs, but they could be preserved and decorated for the Easter feast, where their return to the table symbolized the end of sacrifice and the renewal of abundance. Today, the Easter egg hunt continues this tradition, albeit in a playful guise. The act of searching for hidden eggs echoes older rituals of seeking fertility and renewal, a reminder, perhaps unconscious, of humanity's ancient connection to the Earth's rhythms. The egg, simple yet profound, has endured as a symbol across ages and cultures. Whether buried in myth or brightly painted for a child's delight, it carries with it the weight of millennia, a testament to life's continuity and the mysteries that surround its creation. spring, with its blossoms and green shoots, seems a gentle time of renewal, but its ancient rites often carried a darker edge. The promise of fertility and abundance demanded offerings to the gods, sometimes gifts of grain or wine, but in darker traditions the offering was human. These sacrifices were not acts of cruelty but of necessity, born from a belief that life could only thrive if death paid its price. Among the most infamous spring rites was the Celtic tradition of the Wicker Man, a towering effigy filled with offerings to the gods. According to Roman accounts, human sacrifices were placed inside the Wicker Man, their deaths ensuring the renewal of the earth and the prosperity of the tribe. The act was both brutal and sacred, a ritual acknowledgement that life and death were inseparable, that one could not flourish without the other's surrender. This concept of sacrifice is deeply tied to the agricultural cycle. The seed, buried in the ground, must decay to bring forth new life. For ancient peoples, the earth itself seemed to demand a reflection of this process, a symbolic death to renew the land. These rites were acts of devotion and desperation, a pact between humanity and the unseen forces that governed existence. The Christian story of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection mirrors these themes of sacrificial death and renewal. Just as the Wicker Man's offerings were meant to bring life to the community, Christ's sacrifice is framed as an act of salvation, bringing spiritual life to all humanity. The cross, like the Wicker Man, became a symbol of death transformed into renewal, a bridge between suffering and redemption. This parallel is no coincidence. The early church, seeking to connect its theology with existing pagan beliefs, adopted the language and symbolism of these rites, reinterpreting them within a Christian framework. The dark ritual of the Wicker Man found new life in the story of the Passion, its themes of sacrifice and rebirth woven into the Easter narrative. Yet the echoes of these older rites remain. The haunting image of the Wicker Man burning in a field persists in popular culture, a reminder of humanity's ancient relationship with the cycles of life and death. Beneath the surface of Easter's joy lies a history steeped in the primal need to honour and appease the forces of nature, a tradition both beautiful and terrifying. The story of resurrection is not unique to Christianity. Across cultures, myths of death and return have sought to explain the cycles of nature, where life emerges anew from the decay of the past. Among the most enduring of these tales is that of Persephone, the Greek goddess whose journey between the underworld and the surface world symbolizes the eternal dance of death and rebirth. Persephone's descent into Hades marks the arrival of winter, a time when the earth lies dormant and lifeless. Her return, drawn back to the world by her mother Demeter's grief and devotion, heralds the renewal of spring. This cyclical journey is both literal and metaphorical, a reflection of the seasons and a profound commentary on the interconnectedness of loss and renewal. Eostre, the Germanic goddess of spring, similarly embodies these themes. Her festival, held during the equinox, celebrated the balance of light and dark and the earth's awakening. Unlike Persephone, Eostre does not descend into darkness, but her presence signals a triumph over it. The fertility she brings, symbolized by hares and eggs, underscores the season's promise of new beginnings. Christianity's resurrection narrative shares these themes, offering spiritual renewal through Christ's triumph over death. The parallels are striking. A figure descends into the realm of death, only to rise again, bringing hope and salvation. In both pagan and Christian traditions, the resurrection is not merely an event, but a cosmic truth, a reflection of nature's cycles and humanity's resilience. By aligning Easter with these older myths, the Church wove its message into the fabric of existing beliefs, ensuring its resonance across cultures. Yet the older stories remain, their echoes blending with the Easter narrative to create a season that is both sacred and ancient, a celebration of life's enduring power over death. Spring, after the long famine of winter, brought with it a celebration of life's return. Across ancient cultures, the arrival of warmth and fertility was marked with feasts, joyful gatherings that honoured the gods and expressed gratitude for survival. These springtime meals were not merely indulgences, but sacred rituals, offerings of abundance to ensure continued blessings. For the Celts, the feasts of Beltane signalled the start of the fertile season. Held at the beginning of May, these gatherings were filled with roasted meats, breads, and early spring vegetables, all cooked over roaring fires that symbolised the sun's strengthening power. Communities shared food as a collective offering to deities of fertility, asking for bountiful harvests and healthy livestock. The feasts were also acts of defiance, reminders that the dark grip of winter had been broken and life could begin anew. In the Roman Empire, the festival of Floralia celebrated Flora, the goddess of flowers and fertility. The feasts were wild, filled with honeyed cakes, fresh fruits and wine, offerings that honoured the blooming earth. Revellers adorned themselves in garlands, danced through fields and toasted to the season's promise of renewal. The communal nature of these events fostered not only gratitude, but also a deep sense of connection between the people and the land. The Persians, too, held grand feasts during Nowruz, their New Year celebration tied to the spring equinox. Tables were laden with symbolic foods, greens for renewal, eggs for creation, and sweets for happiness. Nowruz was a time to honour the rebirth of the world, a shared act of gratitude that spanned households and generations. When Christianity began to absorb these pagan customs, the spring feast evolved into Easter meals. The joyous consumption of lamb, eggs, and sweetbreads, now staples of Easter dinner, echoes the offerings made to pagan gods of fertility and renewal. Lamb, for example, was not only a symbol of Christ as the Lamb of God, but also a traditional sacrificial animal in both Jewish Passover and pagan spring rites. Easter's focus on communal meals reflects the ancient belief that food was a bridge between humanity and the divine. Sharing a feast was more than sustenance. It was a sacred act, one that reaffirmed the bonds of community and celebrated life's triumph over death. Today, the remnants of these ancient customs persist in modern Easter traditions. From ham and lamb dinners to chocolate eggs and hot cross buns, the foods we enjoy at Easter carry echoes of older, deeper meanings. These meals are not just celebrations, but acts of continuity, threads that tie us to the rituals of renewal that have marked spring for millennia. The jubilant processions and colourful parades of Easter have their roots in the ancient festivals that heralded the arrival of spring. These gatherings, filled with music, dance, and ritual, were more than celebrations. They were acts of devotion, expressions of unity with the forces of fertility and renewal. In their rhythms and pageantry, they carried the hopes of entire communities, channeling the season's transformative energy into acts of collective joy. One of the most vivid examples comes from the Roman festival of Cybele, the Phrygian mother goddess whose rites symbolized life's renewal. Held in late March, the Megalesia festival featured dramatic processions through city streets, where devotees carried sacred statues and performed rituals to honor Cybele's connection to fertility and the natural world. The festival culminated in feasts and theatrical performances, a communal act of reverence and gratitude. In Celtic traditions, Beltane processions marked the transition from winter to summer. Dancers adorned with flowers and greenery led processions through fields and villages, invoking blessings on the land. Bonfires were lit at sacred sites, their flames leaping high into the night, symbolizing the sun's power and the fertility it brought. These processions were deeply symbolic, blending the natural and the divine in acts of public devotion. The Norse honored Freyja and Freya, deities of fertility, with spring festivals that featured processions and ritualized dances. Communities carried effigies of the gods through fields, a gesture believed to ensure prosperity and growth. These processions, like their Celtic counterparts, celebrated the intertwining of human life with the cycles of nature, a reminder of the divine forces that govern survival. With the spread of Christianity, these traditions were not erased, but transformed. Easter parades, a fixture of modern celebrations, evolved from these ancient rites. In the Middle Ages, Christian processions honouring the resurrection mirrored the pageantry of pagan festivals, incorporating symbols of spring's renewal. Crosses adorned with flowers replaced effigies of fertility gods, and hymns of resurrection echoed the chants of older rites. Today's Easter processions retain the spirit of these ancient celebrations, blending sacred and communal elements. In Spain, Semana Santa, Holy Week, features dramatic processions where participants carry ornate floats depicting scenes of Christ's Passion. The rhythmic music and solemn pageantry harken back to the reverence and devotion of pagan festivals, even as they honour Christian themes. The Easter parade tradition in the United States, popularized in the 19th century, brings a lighter, more festive tone to these rituals. Yet even here, the echoes of older processions remain, communities coming together in celebration, adorned in their finest walking streets in acts of collective joy. These processions, ancient and modern, remind us of the enduring power of public celebration. They channel the hopes and gratitude of communities, marking the passage of seasons and the renewal of life. Whether honouring gods of fertility or the risen Christ, they speak to humanity's need to connect with each other, with the divine, and with the rhythms of the natural world. In recent decades, there has been a growing revival of interest in pagan spirituality, particularly among those seeking to reconnect with the rhythms of the earth. For modern pagans, Easter, or Ostara, as it is often called, is a time to honour the spring equinox, celebrating balance, renewal, and the promise of growth. Rituals involving planting, lighting candles, and decorating altars with symbols of fertility are once again practiced, echoing traditions that date back thousands of years. This resurgence isn't confined to neo-pagan communities. Broader cultural movements, including the environmental and sustainability movements, have embraced themes that align with pagan spirituality. Easter, with its focus on life's renewal, resonates deeply in a world increasingly conscious of nature's fragility and humanity's place within it. The holiday, even in its Christian form, serves as a reminder of the interconnectedness of life. A message that feels ever more urgent in an age of ecological crisis. Popular culture, too, continues to draw on the pagan themes embedded in Easter. From spring-themed films and television specials to advertisements saturated with images of blossoming flowers and new life, the season's symbols remain potent. They evoke a sense of hope and transformation, appealing to audiences across religious and cultural lines. Whether celebrated in churches or in the aisles of a department store, Easter's enduring allure lies in its ability to tap into humanity's primal connection to the cycles of the earth. This blending of ancient and modern, sacred and secular, speaks to the resilience of these symbols. Though their meanings have shifted, their essence remains. In every brightly coloured egg and frolicking bunny, in every flower blooming in an Easter basket, the echoes of pagan rites continue to call, reminding us of the profound and timeless truths they represent.